Talk about having your ducks in a row, or more like having your ducks in a herd. It's breakfast time for these ducklings in China's Jiangxi province.
Rice is one of the most fragile crops on Earth. One tiny mistake, and your entire harvest is dead. That's why, when China intentionally dropped thousands of ducks into their most valuable rice fields, people thought the farmers had completely lost their minds. Ducks eat plants. They trample mud. It looked like an absolute disaster in the making. But instead of destroying the farms, the ducks triggered something no one expected. The toxic pests disappeared, the polluted water turned crystal clear, and the ruined soil completely healed itself. So how did this seemingly massive risk become one of the most unexpected farming solutions in the world? And what ancient Chinese system was secretly making all of this work? Let's get into it. The seal collapse. The human population has been rising faster than ever before. In just 50 years, the world doubled from about 4 billion people to over 8 billion. And that one change created a pressure humanity had never faced before. How do you feed everyone? To answer that, farming didn't just evolve, it completely transformed. Machines replaced human labor across massive fields. Harvesters began doing in hours what once took days, and chemical fertilizers and pesticides became the quick solution to push harvests beyond natural limits. At first, it looked like a breakthrough. But here's where things start to change. Because while the world was celebrating higher yields, something darker was happening underneath those fields. Across Asia and many rice-growing regions, farming became heavily dependent on chemicals just to keep crops alive, protected from insects, weeds, and disease. And slowly, quietly, the soil started changing. Not overnight, not in a visible way, but deep underground. The natural system that kept soil alive was beginning to break down. Every year, agriculture now contributes roughly 20 to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and a large part of that comes from chemical fertilizers alone. But that's only one side of the problem. Pesticides were also wiping out the tiny organisms that healthy soil depends on to survive. Microorganisms that once recycled nutrients naturally were disappearing. And here's the twist most people miss. The more damage the soil suffered, the more chemicals farmers had to use. A cycle began forming. Farmers used more chemicals, but instead of fixing the problem, the soil weakened even more, which forced them to use even stronger chemicals. And then scientists confirmed a disturbing reality. Over 40% of the world's agricultural land is now losing its natural ability to recover. For rice farming, the situation was even more critical. Because rice isn't just another crop, it feeds more than half the world's population. So when rice fields lose balance, the impact doesn't stay in one place. Water systems get polluted, fish disappear, pests become resistant, and farmers? They respond the only way they know how. More chemicals, stronger pesticides, but the results only got worse. Even countries with advanced agricultural systems, like China, began feeling the pressure. Massive production demands, years of chemical use, and land that was slowly losing its strength. In many regions, farmland no longer behaved like living soil. It became exhausted, unresponsive, almost dead. We were producing more food than ever, while slowly destroying the very ground it depends on. So they started looking backwards, not forward, backward, to farming methods that existed long before chemicals, long before machines, when rice fields were treated as living ecosystems, systems where water, plants, insects, animals, and soil all worked together in balance. And surprisingly, these older systems had survived floods, climate shifts, and centuries of farming without destroying the land. But modern agriculture had pushed them aside. They were considered too simple, too slow, too outdated. Until now. Because as the damage kept spreading, scientists began circling back to one forgotten method. A system so simple, most people refused to believe it could still work today. The forgotten rice field secret. For centuries, farmers across East Asia managed rice fields in a completely different way. They did not treat the land like a factory that needed endless chemical support. They treated the fields like living systems that could protect and feed themselves when every part worked together properly. To modern farmers, the system sounded strange and risky. Releasing live ducks into fragile rice fields looked more like a disaster than a farming method. But in many parts of China and Japan, farmers had been doing exactly that for centuries. Shortly after transplanting young rice plants, they released ducks directly into the flooded paddies. The ducks spent their days moving slowly through shallow water while searching for food. They ate insects hiding near the roots. They pulled young weeds from the mud before those weeds could spread across the field. Their movement disturbed the surface gently without damaging the stronger rice plants growing above the water. The system looked simple from a distance, but farmers understood every part of it very carefully. The ducks reduced the need for outside fertilizer because their droppings returned nutrients directly into the soil every single day. Farmers no longer depended entirely on expensive chemical products to maintain crop growth. At the same time, the rice plants benefited from cleaner water and less competition from unwanted weeds growing between rows. Farmers across China and Japan used the rice duck system for more than 600 years. And surprisingly, it worked extremely well. Floods came, storms came, seasons changed. But the fields stayed productive because the system depended on balance instead of heavy chemicals. Pest outbreaks became less common, and the soil remained healthy for years. There were no scientific manuals back then. Farmers learned through experience and passed the knowledge from one generation to another. Over time, they became incredibly precise, even knowing exactly how many ducks a field could handle without damaging the crops. The rice field itself worked like a complete ecosystem. As industrial agriculture expanded across the 20th century, many governments and companies dismissed these traditional systems as old-fashioned and inefficient. Large machines and synthetic chemicals appeared faster, cleaner, and more profitable for massive farming operations. Over time, many farmers abandoned the rice duck system completely, while modern farming spread across Asia. But after years of environmental damage, researchers slowly returned to these forgotten rice fields and noticed something unusual. The ducks were doing far more than most people expected. Somehow, the fields stayed healthier and more balanced without depending heavily on chemicals. Scientists wanted to understand what was happening beneath the water's surface, but using ducks inside fragile rice paddies was far more complicated than it looked. Ducks. Entry in fields. Researchers and farmers could not simply throw ducks into damaged rice paddies and hope for success. They needed more than just ducks to make the system work. Researchers spent years studying the fields, water levels, plant growth, and duck behavior before trying the method on a larger scale. Success depended on exact timing, careful observation, and strict control throughout every stage of the process. In many farming regions across China and Japan, farmers released the ducks only 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting rice seedlings. During this short period, the plants became strong enough to survive movement inside the shallow water. Even then, many people expected failure. Young rice plants looked fragile beside hundreds of moving ducks. Farmers feared the birds would crush stems, destroy roots, and ruin entire sections of the field within days. And from a distance, the scene looked like complete chaos. Hundreds of ducks rushed through muddy water at the same time, spreading across narrow rice pathways in every direction. Some observers believed the system looked more like a disaster than a farming method, but inside the fields, something very different was happening. The ducks rarely attacked healthy rice plants. Instead, they focused almost entirely on movement inside the water and mud around them. The ducks spent most of the day searching constantly through the flooded rows, while eating pests before large populations could spread across the field. Brown plant hoppers, stem borers, leaf hoppers, and other small aquatic insects quickly became their main targets. Within only a few weeks, farmers started noticing visible changes. Insect activity dropped sharply across many sections of the rice paddies. Farmers sprayed fewer pesticides because the ducks already removed large numbers of harmful organisms naturally. Areas that once suffered heavy pest pressure started remaining more stable throughout important growth stages. But that wasn't the only upside. The ducks also changed the condition of the surface itself. As the flocks walked continuously across the paddies, they disrupted young weed growth before thick clusters formed beneath the mud. Duckweed and wild rice shoots lost the chance to spread aggressively between the planted rows. Every movement from the ducks interrupted root formation across the shallow soil surface. Farmers no longer needed the same level of chemical weed control that earlier farming systems depended on heavily. Researchers then discovered another unusual effect. The constant movement across the flooded paddies prevented the upper layer of soil from becoming stagnant during long periods of standing water. Water circulated more evenly through the field, while oxygen entered the surface layer more frequently. Rice roots expanded deeper into the soil instead of remaining weak near the top layer. This helped the plants absorb water and nutrients more effectively while becoming stronger during floods, heat, and changing weather conditions. Some researchers compared the process to natural tilling that continued across the field throughout the entire day, without large farming machines entering the paddies. And while the ducks kept moving through the water, scientists slowly realized the birds were changing far more than insects, weeds, and soil conditions inside those rice fields. What looked chaotic from the outside actually followed a clear biological pattern inside the paddies. The ducks searched, fed, moved, and stirred the water from morning until evening without stopping for long periods. Farmers monitored the flocks carefully because timing and movement affected every part of the field differently. Some rice paddies showed healthier plants after only one growing season, while others produced stronger grain formation later on. After seeing these results, farming groups across several regions in China slowly started expanding the duck system. But researchers soon realized something even more surprising was happening beneath the muddy water. Hidden biological machine. Scientists soon discovered that the duck system was changing far more than insect activity inside the rice paddies. Important reactions were happening beneath the muddy water where most people never looked closely before. The soil also started changing over time. In chemical-heavy paddies, standing water often traps harmful gases beneath thick, compact mud layers. These conditions weakened biological activity underground and slowly damaged the natural soil balance. But ducks constantly disturbed the upper mud surface while searching for insects and soft plants throughout the day. Their movement allowed fresh oxygen to enter shallow soil areas more regularly. Better oxygen levels supported bacteria and microorganisms that naturally broke down organic material inside the paddies. Researchers then discovered another major environmental effect. Flooded rice fields release large amounts of methane gas during long growing seasons. Scientists recorded a 20 to 30% reduction in methane emissions inside many rice duck farming systems compared with heavily chemical-dependent paddies. The moving ducks interrupted stagnant conditions that normally increase methane production beneath flooded surfaces. The results slowly started becoming visible. As the ducks reduced methane production and chemical use dropped, the water quality began improving across many rice paddies. What once looked like thick, muddy slurry slowly started becoming clearer and more alive again. Algae growth became less common, unpleasant smells started fading, and in some regions, small fish, frogs, and dragonflies slowly returned to the fields after disappearing for years. Thick algae growth appeared less often because fewer synthetic chemicals entered the water. Farmers noticed fewer unpleasant smells rising from stagnant mud across monitored fields. Economic results surprised many farming communities across China and Japan as well. Studies showed that pesticide costs often dropped by 50 to 70% after farmers managed duck systems correctly. Chemical fertilizer expenses also decreased by 20 to 40% in many monitored paddies. Balancing the paddies. From a distance, the rice duck system looks completely uncontrolled. Ducks move through muddy water in every direction, while farmers watch from the edges of the fields. But behind that simple image, farmers follow extremely careful timing and strict field management throughout the entire growing season. One mistake at the wrong moment can damage rice plants, reduce harvests, and break the natural balance operating inside the paddies. Farmers cannot release the ducks whenever they want. They usually introduce the ducks only 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting begins. At this stage, the rice plants stand strong enough to survive movement in shallow water without bending or breaking apart. If farmers release the ducks too early, young seedlings can suffer serious damage before the roots fully stabilize beneath the mud. If they wait too long, insects and weeds gain stronger control across the paddies before the ducks begin feeding actively inside the fields. Duck numbers also matter greatly. Studies in China and Japan showed that most farmers achieve the best results with around 150 to 300 ducks per hectare, depending on water depth, soil condition, and rice variety. Small flocks cannot create enough biological impact across larger farming areas. Large flocks create different problems. Too many ducks disturb the water too heavily, weaken rice roots, and reduce healthy plant growth across important stages of the season. Farmers must also remove the ducks carefully before rice plants enter the flowering stages. During panicle initiation, rice plants become extremely sensitive to outside disturbance. Too much movement inside the paddies during this period can reduce grain formation and lower final harvest quality before collection begins. Other dangers continue threatening the system from outside the fields. The field's recovery. As more farmers manage the rice duck system successfully, many damaged farming areas slowly started changing in ways that local communities had not seen for many years. Water channels around several paddies became clearer during the later parts of the growing season. Thick chemical smells faded from many flooded fields. Farmers working near the paddies also noticed fewer dead insects floating across the surface after spraying seasons ended in several monitored regions across China and Japan. Life gradually returned to these ecosystems. Dragonflies started appearing above the water again during warmer months. Frogs returned to wet areas surrounding the rice paddies. Small fish moved through connected irrigation channels that once carried heavy chemical runoff into nearby farming villages. Water birds also visited some farming regions more often after biological activity increased inside healthier rice ecosystems. Many local farmers described these changes as signs that the land was finally recovering from years of chemical pressure. In several regions, farmers earned additional income by selling duck meat and eggs after the rice harvest ended each season. Researchers and agricultural planners continued studying these farming systems closely as environmental concerns increased across global food production. Many experts no longer viewed the rice duck model as an outdated farming habit from earlier centuries. Instead, they started viewing it as a practical system capable of protecting soil, supporting stable harvests, reducing pollution, and lowering dependence on large chemical inputs at the same time. The story of these rice fields was never really about ducks alone. It showed how quickly ecosystems can begin recovering when farming works with natural biological systems instead of constantly fighting against them. Across several parts of China and Japan, fields once damaged by long periods of chemical dependence slowly transformed into healthier environments that supported plants, animals, water systems, and farming communities together again. The results shocked many researchers because one of the most effective answers to a modern agricultural crisis came from a farming method that existed long before modern industry ever appeared. Many people believed modern farming needed stronger chemicals and larger machines every year. But rice fields in China revealed something unexpected. Ducks helped damaged land recover, reduced pollution, protected crops, and supported farming families at the same time. So, what do you think about this surprising success story? And what other ancient farming methods do you think could still work today? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because we'll be uploading more incredible stories like this one in the coming weeks. Until then, see ya.